I'm Rick Howard, president of Kingdom Magic Vacations. In my job, I get to travel a lot. I explore the world on land and sea, eating in unique restaurants and discovering interesting locations. I'm always looking for new places to visit, and I want you to travel with me. Welcome to Travel with Rick. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Travel with Rick. Happy Halloween! Oh, well that was yesterday, but remember yesterday on our Food and Wine epic 31-day ending, I told you we had a special Halloween episode for you. It's amazing. Brought it all the way back from Killarney, Ireland. When we were on an adventure by Disney earlier this year, we actually did a ghost tour in Killarney. Dude, it was spooky. It's going to be amazing to see. I can't wait for you to watch it. Enjoy our ghost tour from Adventures by Disney, Killarney, Ireland. Come on, let's go.
Okay, St. Mary's Cathedral is just down the far end of the town. Large building dating back to the late 1800s. Now just across the way from that is a bridge called King's Bridge. Over the bridge you go and you're into the domain. Now the domain would have been the back garden, I suppose, of the local landlord. Their estates were vast, 100,000 acre estates, and they always kept a couple of hundred acres around the house for themselves. High walls, high gates to keep the riffraff and the peasants out, and they could wander around and do their thing quite freely. Now, there's a lovely little thatched cottage in there. It's tea rooms, and it's now a tea rooms. This house was lived in until the early 1970s by a local family. And nobody really understood why this family moved out, why they would leave such a gorgeous location. It's actually idyllic. And no one ever really gave an explanation. There was nothing satisfactory ever given to anybody. We came across a local historian who happened to know the family. We were doing a bit of research for this trip, and he told us this story. You won't find it written anywhere. There's no record of it anywhere. He got it from the family himself. Now, back in the 1970s, early 1970s, 1971, one of the girls of the house, she was down in Rosscastle. Rosscastle is about 3 or 4 kilometres from the house. Series of pathways over a river down. This girl would have grown up here. She would have been, well used to the domain, knew her way around quite well. Now her visit to her neighbours, the Clifford family, went a little bit late. It was about 1 o'clock at night, and she was making her way home. It was winter time. It was dark. There was a full moon. There was kind of moving in and out of the clouds. She was making her way along. And the way you walk along, you feel like there's someone watching you or somebody looking at you. The hair starts to rise in the back of your head. As she was walking along through the darkest part of the wood, she got a really strange feeling. It just didn't feel right. She turned around, and she could see a kind of a dark, hooded, caped figure, about 30 or 40 yards behind her. Not moving, just standing there completely still in the middle of the pathway. She got a little bit worried, as you would, turned around, started to walk a little bit faster, making her way home. Now she came to the Deanoch River. Now the Deanoch River, there's only a couple of bridges. There's about, at least 1,000 yards. There's 3 bridges and at least 1,000 yards between the bridges. She got to the bridge. At the time, it had a gateway on it. And she had opened the gate, turned around, closed the gate. She looked up again to see where was this thing still there. Gone. Disappeared. No sign of it. She breathed a sigh of relief. She turned around to face her home. There it was, about 40 yards in front of her. This thing had gone from about 30 or 40 yards behind her to about 30 or 40 yards in front in a matter of seconds, the time it took her to open and close the gate. Now she could literally see the lights of her house in the distance, and she kind of had a choice. She could either turn back into the woods, into the darkness, try and make it back to the Clifford family, or she could push on. She was obviously a very brave girl, a lot braver than I would be, I'd imagine. She pushed on against this thing, and luckily it moved away and disappeared into the darkness. Now she got home, told her parents. They bolted all the windows, bolted the doors. The next morning they went up to the local guard station, the local cop shop, which was quite close at the time. It was located on New Street. Now they made a complaint. This thing obviously scared the bejesus out of her. They didn't hear anything for about 3 weeks. All of a sudden one morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning, there was the most unmerciful pounding on the front door. Somebody at the door screaming, "Let me in, let me in, let me in." Father came down, looked out the window. They could see it was the local sergeant, the local guard. They left him in. The guy was shaking from head to toe, pale as a ghost, sweating and shaking and shivering and talking gibberish. The only bit of conversation they got out of him that night was, "I saw it. I saw it." He sat in the corner of the kitchen for about 2 hours until the dawn broke, left the house, went up to the local guard station, picked up his few belongings, went back to his house, and he left town. Went back to his main house. He'd only been posted here a couple of months, gone, disappeared. Nobody's ever seen or heard from that guy again. We don't know what he saw. Nobody knows what he saw. All we know is that the family left. They moved out about 3 or 4 weeks after that. They left the house. The house hasn't been occupied since. As I said, it is now used as a tea room during the daytime and it's locked up at night. Now, we were doing the story. We were down there. We were standing, myself and Derek, and we were looking around, and we kind of noticed. Also at that time, shortly after that, about 2 years after that, a lot of satanic rituals, blood sacrifice were going on around this part of the town in the woods. Locals were finding headless dogs and headless cats hanging off the local churches in the morning, early mass on a Sunday morning. Went on for about 6 or 8 months. People were finding the side of the pentagram in the woods with blood stains around it, and local people complained that they see a lot of men with hoods and gathering in the corners of woods. Nobody ever caught anybody, nobody ever was found out, despite the fact that the guards would have been down there on a regular basis. We reckon if you stand there at the cottage and you look across the river, you can see St. Mary's Cathedral. Behind it is the Bishop's Palace. To the left of that is the old monastery. You have St. Bridget's National School, you have St. Brendan's School, a whole load of religious institutions all on one side of the river. And then you've got this kind of nastiness going on the other side of the river. Devil worship, blood sacrifice, these hooded cape figures wandering around scaring people. There's also a tree there which is called the Hanging Tree. And many a man or woman or child was brought from Rosscastle over hundreds of years, a period of hundreds of years, and hung until they were dead at this particular tree. It's all hollowed out now, very black and very bleak looking. So whether it was disturbed spirits or disturbed souls from that time, we don't know. As Mr. Ripley would say, believe it or not. Okay guys, we're nearly, we normally do 2 site visits on this. I'm going to do a slightly extended 1 site visit tonight. The other site we go to is closed for reasons beyond our control, shall we say. So we're coming up very shortly to Mucker's Abbey. We're going to get off the bus and a short little walk down to the Abbey, and I'm going to tell you, we'll be down there for maybe about an hour and 15 minutes. I'm going to tell you some stories of the people who inhabit it, or maybe still inhabit it. We'll see how we go down there tonight. Now we are heading into a working graveyard, okay? It's a very old graveyard, dates back to the middle of the 1400s. And there hasn't been many burials there in recent years. There was 2 last year, and nothing I remember in the previous 3 or 4 years. It's only if you have family members buried down here, that gives you a right to be buried in this particular graveyard. So I will ask you when we get there to be respectful. We'll stay together when we head down to the Abbey itself. Nobody wandering away from the group. The temptation is there's lovely stairways, windy stairways, there's lots of little nooks and crannies. The temptation is, oh, what's up there? If you fall off, you possibly die and you'll have no insurance, and that'll be awful. So we'll stick together and we'll be respectful of where we are. And like I said, no climbing in graves, no standing in graves. We just give a walk through that, and we kind of stay away from the actual graveyard itself. So if you follow on after me, folks.
Abbey. The date they give for the building of the Abbey is 1448, and it was built by a guy called Donald McCarthy Moore. The McCarthys, very powerful family here in South Kerry during the medieval times. The McCarthys, the O'Sullivans and the O'Donoghus. They actually managed to keep the Normans away. The Normans came here around the 12th century. They managed to actually keep them out of South Kerry until well into the late 1500s. Now this guy Donald McCarthy Moore, he spent most of his life fighting with his neighbours or with the English over cattle, over land, various other arguments. The guy would have killed quite a lot of men over the course of his life. Now he was heading for old age, he was getting a little worried, death was imminent. Which way was he going to go? Was he going to go to heaven or was he going to go to hell? So he was out one day, he was out riding his horse, surveying his lands, and he came across a Franciscan monk. Got talking with the monk, and he asked the monk what could he do to gain forgiveness for all of his sins. How was he guaranteed that he was going to heaven? The monk thought, I'm sure he had a good business head, he said, build an abbey in honour of God, and of course we'll run it for you. Now he gave him a rhyme, and the rhyme finished with build it on the rock of song. He went back to his castle, he disguised himself as a peasant, and he wandered around his lands for a year and a day. Lay down here to sleep one night, in a bed of ferns, woke up in the morning and he found the air was full of the most beautiful music he'd ever heard. He knew he had found the rock of song. Now, he actually got involved himself in the physical labour of the building of the abbey, and he lived out his days in prayer here with the monks, hoping to gain forgiveness for his sins. I can't tell you which way he went, I don't know, but I kind of hope he went that way, because he built a damn fine abbey, as you'll see when we move in a little bit further. Now, you've all heard of Henry VIII, famous English king?
Yes.
Guy had a lot of issues with girlfriends and wives and religion and all sorts of things. We won't get into any of that.
Commitment.
He did bring in an act though in 1536. It was called the Disillusionment of the Monasteries Act. This meant that all the convents, churches, their treasures, their lands, everything, all came under the control of the English crown. Abbeys like this should have been closed down. Now, the county you're in at the moment is County of Kerry, okay? Not all the counties in Ireland have names, but this one is called the Kingdom. It's known as the Kingdom because of we were very cut off for a long time, particularly during the medieval period. Lots of rivers, lakes and mountains blocking access to the county. They made laws in Dublin around an area called the Pale. They made laws in London. We eventually heard about them down here, and we kind of went, yeah, and carried on doing what we were doing anyway. So hence the name, Kingdom, very much a law unto ourselves. So this abbey continued to flourish until towards the end of the 1500s. 1558 is when his daughter Elizabeth came into power. She wanted to consolidate the English position here in South Kerry. She captured one of the McCarthy girls, and she was going to marry her off to a general in her army. The McCarthys were not going to let this happen. They captured her from the castle, brought her here, and she was married to a third cousin at midnight. All very romantic, but not really. Marriage convenience, and they actually paid with their lives not too long after that. Queen Elizabeth got word of this. She was furious. She dispatched a large army here to take care of the problem, kill the monks, burn the abbey, sort it out. The monks got wind of this, and they scattered up into the mountains, up into the hills, disappeared. There were 2 monks left. A senior monk called Brother Donica Hurley, and a young apprentice monk whose name we don't know. These were given the job of burying the treasure and then getting out of Dodge, so to speak. Unfortunately, they were captured. They were tortured, and they were put to death here in the abbey. That's fact. Now, we did a bit of research, and we came across a favourite method of torture at the time. It was called the iron boot. Boot made out of iron, not too bad, a little bit uncomfortable. You hobbled around a bit. Then they filled it with vegetable fat. That's not too bad, a bit squelchy. But then they placed it over an open fire. And they literally boiled the flesh off the bones of your feet. Can you imagine, Fane? We all know how sensitive our feet are. Not good. The treasures of Mucker's Abbey have never been found. You've heard of the Ardagh Chalice, the Book of Kells, all these treasures. This monastery would have been just as wealthy. There would have been nice stuff here, I guarantee you that. None of it has ever been found. These guys went to their death in silence. This tour, we were at it 5 years, and we started, it was a business venture, tell stories, entertain people, bit of a swing on the normal sort of Killarney things you get here. Not a whole pile of interest in the paranormal, myself or Derek, to start with, but people coming on the tour have kind of educated us as much as anything else. We had one lady on, an American lady on here one night, and she claimed to have felt the presence of 3 monks inside here. She didn't see or hear anything, but she felt their presence. She said they're still here, they're guarding the abbey, they're not going anywhere, they were given the job. They could be, like I said, this is what she told us afterwards. There's one room here, the last room we go into. We normally down here is pitch black night. This time of the year it's a little bit brighter. We've brought the tour forward a little bit earlier for Disney, but it's normally dark by the time we get down here. The last room we go through, we line everybody up against the wall, we turn out all the lights, it's complete sensory deprivation, no lights, no nothing, no sound, and we try and do a minute's silence inside there. And a lot of strange stuff. Like I said, we indulge in a bit of paddywhackery on the bus, we don't do anything down here. In this room, people have felt like someone's breathing in their ear, someone's pushing down their shoulders. People got the back of their leg touched. One guy actually collapsed inside here. Another lady felt she was pinned to the wall, and it's like someone stuck a needle up her nose. All sorts. Now, sounds like a lot, I'm telling you here together, but this is over the course of 5 years. We can be coming down here night and night, and absolutely nothing happens. But then there are nights where things do happen. So let's go and see if there's anything. Tonight might be our lucky night. And I hope that night gets in the video, or I'll be very upset.
The only thing I
Very shortly, so. Okay, now if you arrived here in the, this is the nave of the church, when it was a functioning church. Obviously there was a roof on it. Seating here, people looking up there, the altar, monks bathing in the lights, looking very holy and pious, so on. This abbey is unusual because the bell tower, normally a Franciscan abbey you can tell them miles away. Very narrow, pencil-thin towers. This is unusual. It's actually the only one in Ireland where the bell tower is the width of the abbey itself. Now, if you arrived in here in the early 1700s, the place was a mess. You literally could not walk in here without stepping on a bone or a rib cage or a skull or some part of a human being. There were literally bodies thrown everywhere in various stages of decomposition. Some had been here for hundreds of years, some had literally just been thrown here and were rotting away. What was happening was, there's a great absolution attached to the abbey. Everybody wanted to be buried here. The reason was that can you imagine all the billions of Christians all over the world? If you came from this abbey, if you came from this graveyard, you were first in line at the pearly gates on the day of judgment. So as a result, everybody wanted to be buried here. Despite the fact that there was loads of graveyards all around the town, everybody wanted to come here. Now, it literally got to the point where there wasn't a square inch of ground to bury a person within the grounds of the abbey. The north side wasn't used. The north side belonged to the devil. English soldiers and unbaptized children and all, you got buried there. Now, imagine you made a promise to your relation, your nearest and dearest, their last wishes to be buried in Mucka's Abbey. You're going to try and fulfill that promise. You arrive here, and there isn't literally, if you're wealthy, you build yourself tombs. There's people, about 30 or 40 people buried around on the ground, just around the altar up there as it is. I would say there are hundreds of people underneath us here, in the ground, right underneath our feet. Hard to tell. What people were doing was, you arrive with your relation, and you're looking around. Okay, over you go to a grave, you dig up the body that was in there, you chuck it inside the wall here, you put in your own relation, cover it over, your job's done, out you go. Someone else arrives 2 hours later, they do the same thing. Someone else arrives 3 days after that, 2 hours after that, 2 hours after that. As a result, the bodies just piled higher and higher and higher. It's well documented. A couple of French travel writer in particular, he wrote extensively on it. The Queen's man here wrote about it, the Attorney General, so to speak, he wrote about it. The place was a mess. Literally bodies strewn everywhere. So you can imagine a lot of reason, I suppose, for a lot of disturbed spirits and souls in the air around us. Are we moving further? Are you ready to go? You ready to that torch? Ready.
Dad, the chair. Dad, the chair don't
Tell them mind step. Just repeat it, mind step. That's it. Okay, folks. This is the Cloister Guard, or the ambulatory of the monastery, okay? Very much a feature of monasteries built after the 12th century here in Ireland. Early monasteries, all separate buildings, the church, living accommodation, workshops, storage, that type of stuff. When the new European orders came in here, they started building in this style. A central courtyard like this, called the Cloister Guard, or the ambulatory, and this was usually the focal point of the abbey. Imagine the monks here, late at night, walking around here with their candles, doing their chanting, their Gregorian chanting, that type of stuff. Now, here in the centre we have a yew tree, and the yew tree is over 600 years old. It's been here a long time. It has nearly died on numerous occasions. There's a couple of stories, a couple of legends attached to it. The first one is that simply, if you touch or interfere with the tree in any way, a year and a day from that date, you die. Quite simple. If you were to make a cut, get a knife, make a cut, it supposedly runs red with the blood of all the monks who have died here. Now, it was like a rite of passage for a lot of teenagers in Killarney. The friends of me egging them on, they got their first penknife, get out here to Mucka's Abbey, come in here in the late night, cut the tree, see what happened. There was actually a fence around it up until last year. They've done a lot of conservation work in the Abbey. They're not doing any more. They just pulled out there about 6 months ago. They're just going to just to contain it and keep it as it is. You know, it's not going to be redone, re-roofed or anymore like that. Now, they took away the fence. They're hoping that people won't, they don't believe in that kind of stuff anymore. They're hoping they're just going to monitor it. But I guarantee you, many a young fella ran screaming out of here, because if you were to make a cut in that tree, it will run red. But it's because the sap of the yew tree is naturally red, so the legend kind of, I assume, grew up around that. I still haven't touched it. I'm not touching it. I don't believe in a lot of this stuff, but I'm still not going to tempt fate, okay? We're just going to leave well enough alone, as they say. Now, I described the scene here in the early 1700s. A mess, literally bodies. There would have been bodies piled high all over the place. They were literally being stuffed in here. Yet a guy came to live here, a guy called John Drake. John Drake was known as the Hermit of Muckross. There's a book written, the book is called A Victim of Intolerance. And it's an eyewitness account by locals of this guy's stay in the Abbey. He lived here for 11 years. You imagine the chance of catching a disease, the smell of death, the smell of rotting flesh. And this guy moved in here. He set up shop on the second floor, okay, a little shelter up there for himself. During the daytime, the loveliest man in the world. Could talk to anybody, great conversationalist, could talk about most subjects, gave the impression that he came from money, well educated. Yet he arrived with nothing but the clothes on his back. Now, it was a very different thing at night. He had a lovely garden up the pathway, relied on the charity of locals. Now, at night time though, as soon as darkness fell, the roaring and the wailing and the screaming that went on inside here was frightening. No man, woman or child was ever brave enough to come in here during that 11 years. Nobody knows what was going on inside here in the Abbey. People would stand outside, they would listen to these horrific sounds. It was like there was a demonic battle going on inside. We don't know, we will never know what went on inside. We just know that this guy John Drake, he just disappeared after 11 years. Now, what happened to him? Some people say he found his absolution, he found his forgiveness, he moved on somewhere else. We don't know. Some people say it all got too much, committed suicide, threw himself in the lake. That was even John Drake. We do know that a lady turned up 3 weeks later in her carriage with her servants, very wealthy lady, looking for this guy John Drake. Nobody could point her in the right direction. She stayed for about a week. She moved on, and no one's ever heard anything since. Like I said, this tour brings people. A lot of people have said to us they feel a good energy in here, they feel a very positive energy, they feel a negative energy in here. We get both. We get conflicting, people tell us different things. We kind of think ourselves that maybe the positive energy is the monks, the guys who are charged with the job of burying the treasure, the guys are still here guarding the place. The negative energy could be John Drake. We don't know. Now, an interesting link between John Drake and a more modern writer. You've all heard of a guy called Bram Stoker? Yeah. Okay, Bram Stoker, he's an Irishman born in Dublin, wrote possibly the most famous horror novel ever written, Dracula. Okay? Now, there's a tour in Dublin, wouldn't be as good as this course, they tried, okay? But there's plaques all over the city. Bram Stoker went to school there, he kissed a girl there, he had a ham sandwich over there, that sort of stuff, everywhere, okay? But, and I know there's no people from Dublin on here, I love when we have Dublin people, we get a lot of Dublin people down to Kerry on holidays coming on the tour. But a couple of stories, a lot of people don't know that Bram Stoker spent a lot of his teenage years here in Killarney. The McGillicuddies the McGillicuddy Reeks, the mountain range are actually called after them, very wealthy family, one of their daughters married into the Stoker family, so he would have spent a lot of his teenage years here in Killarney. He would have heard a couple of stories. He would certainly have heard the story of John Drake, because you know what John Drake did every morning? Every morning when John Drake finished his demonic battle, he would climb into a coffin, pull over the lid, and go to sleep for a few hours. Okay? Sounds familiar? Right, it's an established fact, it's well known at this stage that Dracula is based on Irish mythology, based on Irish stories. He just set the whole thing in Transylvania. Now, another story in Kerry mythology is a guy called Dracula. Dracula doesn't sound too dissimilar either. Dracula means bad oil or bad blood from the body. What this guy would do, every time he defeated a tribe in battle, he would bring the body of the leader back. He would tie it off a tree, hang it off some sort of a frame. He would make a couple of cuts, a couple of incisions, and he would drain it of every last drop of blood. And he would drink it, every single last drop, because he believed it gave him the strength and the wisdom of his enemy going forth into his next battle. These are two stories that Bram Stoker certainly heard. So what really happened, was, Bram Stoker came down to Kerry, he got some great ideas, went back up to Dublin, wrote a damn good book, and they're getting all the credit for it. Come back in a couple of years, I'll have my plaque on the wall there. Are you going to continue with your job? Are you up for it? Okay. We're going to shine on the steps here, okay, folks? We're going to bring down first row here, okay? 3 steps down, okay? You're going to stand here again and watch this and the car steps. Okay, if you go inside, actually, if you go in and shine on the inside, okay? No doorway, guys. Okay? No doorway, 3 steps down, okay?
And if there is anything spiritual here, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, might catch it.
Right hands. These are all people who did this. Now, so folks, like I said, this is a place we're normally here. It's pitch black night, it's usually about another hour. The time of the year also, we're just past the longest day of the year. It was only 2 days ago on the 21st, the summer solstice. So as the evenings go on now, every 10-15 minutes it's going to be getting darker and darker and darker. Now, any of you heard of orbs? Anyone know what an orb is?
Yep.
Okay, a few people interested in the alternative. An orb, for those who don't know, and I didn't have any idea of this until I asked somebody or somebody educated me on this trip. An orb is when you take a picture of a particular site, and when you look back over your picture, so I want you to take loads of pictures as the night goes on, every now and again have a quick flick back over them, and if you see little spots of light, unusual circles of light, some are very bright, some can be very faded, some can look like angels' wings. It really depends on the night. Like I said, these are supposedly, they say, signs of spirits in the air around us. They usually manifest themselves in special places when there's a large crowd present. Now, whether it's electromagnetic something in the walls or in the ground, whether it's just midges, flies, spots of rain, dust, I don't know. We get an incredible amount of orbs, particularly down on that wall there, for some reason. So if you have cameras, just snap away the blank wall. And as the night goes on, take loads of pictures and flick back over them as we go. And have a look. You will be surprised. Most nights we will get an orb or two. Some nights we get absolutely nothing. I usually hope we get something. I don't sound like a completely lunatic then.
I found one.
This is what you want.
Did you get one? Yeah. Excellent. The spirits are with us. Oh, what's that? We got a picture of a face on this wall a couple of years ago. And it really looked like a person, the nose, the mouth, everything. I mean, it could be just the shadows on the bricks, just being the face. But this year, 2 nights in a row, 2 different cameras, 2 different people. We got the same face on that wall, and we got the same face on that wall, down in that end of the building. Really, really freaky, virtually identical faces. Now, this particular place, nothing is the next room that all the scary stuff is happening, okay?
Oh no.
One thing only has ever happened here that I can report, okay? I was here last year, it was towards the end of the season, a friend of mine, her son turned 13. She asked me to bring a few of her buddies on the ghost trip. We did a kind of a ghost life for them. Came out here, just a nice day out for the lads. And one young fella, I remember distinctly, tall guy, red hair, white shirt, standing there, and he just started bawling, crying all of a sudden. Just got really upset. He left their parents along for supervision, and one of them went down with him. And I didn't take any notice. I thought, a nervous child, just imagination kind of maybe ran away with him, because this was 2:30, middle of the day, it would have been even brighter than this. But I met his mother before Christmas, and she said while he was in the room here, he was just standing there, and he felt like something was catching his fingers and trying to pull him down into the ground. Don't know what, like I said, it could be more imagination, I don't know. But the corner here, just a kind of an architectural sort of a quirkiness, I suppose. That corner there is known as the guard room, okay? The guard room was linked up to the wardrobe with a ventilation system. The wardrobe is where the monks kept their clothes, it's where we still keep our clothes. The interesting thing about the guard room was the toilet of the monastery. Now, why would you link the toilet with a ventilation system up into where you keep your clothes? Very simple, quite ingenious. Lice and ticks and fleas, all very common in those days. Very little aerial, Omo, disinfectant, Dettol, I don't know what your brands in America are. So what they did was, they used the ammonia from the urine as a very effective disinfectant. Worked quite well. Everybody smelled brutal, I'm sure, but a bit like garlic, if everyone's eating it, no one takes a whole pile of notice. Are we all feeling brave enough to go into the next room? Yeah. Okay, get my assistant here, so... Right here, second. Yeah. So when everyone's gone out, you stand there and you blood out that step for everyone. Okay, guys? Mind the head, okay, if the door hasn't got any higher. Now, like I said, I normally it's pitch black inside here. We line everybody along around the edge with their back to the wall. Turn off all the cameras, all the phones, and it's pitch black, okay? And interesting stuff is happening during that minute of silence. We rarely get to a minute of silence. There's always someone a little bit too nervous. They start giggling or coughing or that sort of stuff. Screaming even to get out. It has been known to happen. Some of the things that have happened inside here, like I told you outside, people feel like there's someone breathing in their ear. It's a common thing. A lot of people get a blinding headache. The second they walk in the door, they get a massive headache. As soon as they leave, they're fine again. A girl came in here one night, she was a bit nervous with her friends. They were kind of poking her, picking her all night. She backed herself into the corner there, cleared the space around her, and next thing she comes running out, she swore blind something caught her in the back of the leg. There was nobody anywhere near. I was here at a hen party one night, and now the girls trying to get a bit of silence out of 20 giggling, kind of half-drunk girls. It was impossible. We got about 10 seconds into the minute silence, and we had to leave. That was the end of it. But as we were walking out, okay, there was one girl down there on the right-hand side, and she was here like this, and she was rubbing her nose. And I said, "Are you okay?" I just shot the torch at her, and she said, "I'm fine." She said, "Keep going." And I was here like this. She was here, and I said, "Are you okay? Are you sure?" And she said, "No, I'm fine. Am I bleeding?" And I said, "No, you're grand. You're fine. There's no mark on you." She said, for about 5 or 10 seconds while we were in here, she was well down there on her own. She felt like something pinned her back against the wall, and like something stuck a needle up her nose. I know. Like if I was making this stuff up, I'd be telling you I saw a man walking out that wall and walking through the other wall. These are things that have genuinely happened to people inside here. The most dramatic was a guy called Martin. Now Martin came along on the trip, obviously dragged here by his girlfriend, didn't want to be here. Martin wanted to be at home with his feet up on the couch watching a football game, drinking a beer. Talking in the background all night, very annoying when you're trying to tell people stories and get an atmosphere going. This guy was chitty-chatting all night long. Anyway, Martin came in here, and Martin turned around very quickly and went back out again. And I kind of said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "I swear, I got a blinding headache the second he walked inside the door. He got an unbelievable, like a migraine." I said, in the interest of science, come back in again and we'll see if the same thing happens. In he came, stood right there, and about 5 seconds after that, boom, down he went. Complete helpless fall, landed on his nose, busted his lip, not a pleasant sight. We actually had to slap him around a little bit to get him out, to get him back. He was actually out cold. I tell you, Martin was very quiet boy for the rest of the night. That was the end of Martin. I was here about 6 weeks later, and this girl started roaring, laughing, and there was a few more with her, and they were actually, that was his sister. She'd come along to hear what had happened the night before. She said he hadn't stopped talking about it since. What was a Disney tour? Actually, one of the Disney tours, another kind of a dramatic event that happened inside here. We were here on Monday night. They were staying in another hotel at the time, which was the Plaza. A guy, one of the passengers had finished reading the paper. He'd put his glasses into a hard case on his inside pocket to come on the tour, loaded up the bus. We did the tour, had good fun, good night. I get a phone call the next evening from the guy that was on it. And he was wondering where we were running. We don't run on Tuesday nights. He was wondering where we were running the next night. They were in town for Monday, Tuesday night. it was a couple, they wanted to come again on the tour. Because when he got back to his hotel, took out his glasses, sat back into the lobby, he was going to finish his newspaper, opened his glasses, all the glass was in smithereens, smashed to bits inside the case, and all the wire frame was twisted around. He did not fall, he did not bump off a wall, he actually felt or saw or heard absolutely. We can't explain it. So he was wondering what happened. Will we move on, folks? Up the other side here, we'll keep going. Right now, gentlemen, like I said, be careful, and we'll go into the right. This is a story that you'll normally hear, any graveyard tour you'll do in Europe or England or Scotland, you'll hear a variation of this story. Have you ever heard the expression "saved by the bell"?
Yeah.
Okay, that didn't originate in the classroom whereby you're asked the teacher, you're asked a question, the teacher's coming at you, you have no idea the answer, and next thing the bell goes, thanks be to God for that. It actually originated in the graveyards of medieval Europe. Okay? The reason was, people were being buried alive at a queer rate. The chance of being buried alive in those days were very high. Because when you went to the pub, and you drank your beer, or whatever your poison was, you drank out of a vessel that had a high content of a substance called pewter. Pewter is lead. It induced a death-like coma in a lot of people. So as a result, people they were terrified of being buried alive. So what they would do, they would tie strings onto their limbs, run it up to a pipe, tie it to a bell, so that if they woke up in the coffin, wiggle around, the bell rings, somebody hears it, saved by the bell. What are the chances of somebody hearing it? Quite high, actually. Maybe not so much in a country graveyard like this, but in the town graveyards, body snatching was quite a popular way of making a couple of bob, making a few dollars. Okay? Climbing into graveyards late at night, digging up the coffins, selling them onto the local medical college. Because the medical profession was coming into its own at that stage. They could not get enough bodies to experiment on, because the only bodies by law they were allowed to experiment on were those of executed prisoners. There were not enough people being executed. So people would climb into the graveyard late at night and sell them on. So the work in the graveyard shift, that also comes from that time. So if you were in the coffin, the bell rang, there was usually 24-hour security around, they would have heard you. The midges have found us, guys. We're going to run. Just as we're going to go down this way, we're going to go to the right. The roadway over to the left is known in the Irish language, it's known as Boreen na Moragh, which means the road of the dead. That's all the coffins would have come from Killarney in times gone. Let's go.
Hey guys, thanks a lot for watching this week's show. We really appreciate it. Listen, for all you old school Travel with Rick viewers, remember our question of the week we used to have here after the video? Now it's over on Facebook, on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Travel with Rick. Yeah, we're on Pinterest also, we're on Twitter, check us out there, and of course, iTunes and YouTube. For all you Apple TV users, check out our iTunes channel. Yeah, we've got podcasts there for you. You can download them, you can watch them on your Apple TV. And of course, make sure you check us out right back here next week for another great episode of Travel with Rick. You never know where we're going to be. We want you to be there with us. See you right back here next week. So long, everybody.